Hello and welcome to the session in which we will start chapter 7. In chapter 7 we are going to be talking about interest rates and bond valuation. When a corporation or government wishes to borrow money from the public on a long-term basis, it usually does so by issuing or selling debt securities that are generally called bonds. In this chapter, we'll be discussing what is a bond, what are the features of a bond, and how do we value a bond or bond valuation. Then we will discuss bond ratings, some different types of bonds, specifically municipal bonds and uh, types of government bonds, plus corporate bonds. We'll also discuss about sukuks. Bond markets, how prices are determined in the bond markets, who buys the bond, and who issues the bond. Then we will talk about inflation and interest rates, and then finally we close this chapter by understanding the determinants of bond yields. Okay, so now let's talk about some key features of a bond. What is a bond? At the basic level, we say a bond is the simplest form of fixed income. It was the first bond was issued in ancient Mesopotamia during 2400 BC, that is in the present day Iraq. Another important thing is the first official government which issued the bond was by the Bank of England during 1693. The Bank of England. Then we are having another important historical significance in terms of US Treasury bond. The first US Treasury bond was issued during World War I. Now let's talk about how this bond works. In order to have this bond, we need to understand what is the par value. The par value or the face value is the principal amount of a bond that is paid at the end of the term. Also, we can represent it as the maturity value. So the par value or the face value or the maturity value is nothing but represented as PN. Then you have the coupon or the coupon rate and the coupon payment. Coupon rate is the periodic interest rate which is agreed upon when the bond is issued. At the time of issuance of the bond, the coupon rate is fixed. So this is fixed. This may not change. The coupon rate is the rate of interest which is being paid by the bond which has been issued at the par value. But what happens is the interest rates fluctuate based on several factors. We will discuss it later, but understand that at the moment when the bond is issued, the coupon rate is fixed. Coupon payments are nothing but the annual coupon or the interest periodically being paid by the bond issuer. The bond issuer may pay generally based on semi-annual basis. Then at the end of the maturity date, the time, the specified date on which the principal amount of the bond is paid. Another important aspect of bond valuation we need to understand is that the interest rate, which is the market rate of return, is given by the yield or yield to maturity, or we call it as the market rate. So the market rate is nothing but the discount rate which we use to value the bond. I think this is understandable. So the final way which we can represent the bond value as value of the bond is represented by, say, P0 is equal to present value of coupons plus present value of the par value, that is, we call it as PN. Since the coupons are received periodically, we may translate this as coupons times present value interest factor annuity, and this is received at a rate and the time period N, okay, plus you have the PN times present value interest factor at the rate and N. So this formula will be easy to derive if you are talking about how to value a bond given the market rate, right, given a coupon and given a PN value. So based on the time period of maturity, right, so we will be able to work it out. I will show you this equation later on, but at the moment please remember that the coupon rate, that is the interest rate of the issued bond, is fixed, but the market interest rates may change. So as interest rates increase, present values decrease. So as interest rates increase, bond prices decrease, and vice versa. So I will demonstrate this using what we call it as the bond equation. So consider a bond with a coupon rate of 10% and an annual coupons. The par value is $1,000 and the bond has a maturity, has a 5 years to maturity. So let's work it out how to do this. So if the yield to maturity is 11%, what is the value of the bond? So using the formula which we have derived earlier, so we can say that the bond value, that is the price of the bond, is equal to the present value of annuity plus the present value of lump sum amount you receive. So I can translate this into what is the coupon now? The coupon is 1000, that is 100, 10% of 1000. So your coupon is 10% of 1000, that becomes $100. So I have $100 times present value interest factor annuity. The rate of interest is based on the discount factor, that is the yield to maturity. So the yield to maturity is 11%, comma 11%, comma the time for maturity is 5 years. Since this is an annual bond, we can work it out. And the present value of a lump sum is given by, so at the end of the 5 years maturity period, you will be receiving $1,000. So $1,000 times present value interest factor 11%, comma 5 years. So I can translate the present value interest factor annuity using the formula 1 by R minus 1 by R times 1 plus R to the power of N. and the present value interest factor of a dollar, $1 is represented by 1 by 1 plus r to the power of n. Okay, so having this into consideration, if you solve this using the equation, so you get 1 by 0.11 minus 1 by 0.11 times 1 plus 0.11 to the power of 5. This will give me the value of, okay, so we will get the value of 3.696958, means I can round it off to 696. Okay, and the value for 1 divided by 1 divided by 1.11 will give me 0.901. So if I solve this one, I will get 0.901. Okay, so if we continue that, so therefore it will be something like 100 times 3.696 plus 1000 times 0.901. So that gives me the final value as 963.04. Let me now demonstrate this using the calculator. So the value which we received now is, okay, now that we have the financial calculator here, let's do this using the financial calculator. So we have these 5 keys which are important. Remember that these are the keys which we will be using to do the time value of money calculations. N is the number of time periods we have, I by Y is the interest rate, PV is the present value, and PMT is the periodic payment which we are going to receive, and you have the future value. So keep in mind that in order to use these functions, you need to have at least 3 values given to you, and you will be able to do the 4th key. Suppose N, I by Y, PMT is given to you, then you can work it out what is the present value. Okay, something like this. So given any 3 keys, the 4th key you can find out using these time value of money buttons on the financial calculator. So let's solve this problem of valuing a bond, which we have considered a bond with a coupon rate of 10% and an annual coupons being paid on this periodically every year. The par value is $1,000 and the bond has 5 years to maturity. The yield to maturity is given as 11%. So using the financial calculator, we can say that N is 5 years. So press 5 and then press N. So N is given as 5. Now talk about I by Y. The second button is I by Y. So I by Y is how much? 11%. So 11% means you don't have to write 0.11, just write 11 and then say I by Y. And then The periodic monthly payments are, because we want to calculate the present value, so we can skip this button. Then we know that the coupons are paid on a periodic way. So how much is the coupon? The coupon which is being paid is 100, so I feed it as 100. The future value is nothing but the PN value at the time of maturity, that is 1000. So 1000 FV. So given these buttons, then we can find out the present value of this by simply pressing compute button and then press PV. So we get 963.04, and that is what we got using the formula method. Now I will show you how to do in a table method or the table value method. So suppose you have the tables given to you, how you are going to do this in the time value tables. Yeah, using the table approach, you will have a timeline, say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So each year we are receiving $100 as coupon. Okay, then in the fifth year we will also receive back the PN, that is the maturity value, that is the par value of 1000. So if we put it in the table method, you have year, cash flows, present value factor at the 11% yield to maturity, and the present value. So you just list 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then the cash flows 100, like this. The last year, the fifth year, we have 100 plus 1000, 1100. So in a simple calculator, if you can get the PV factor by simply dividing 1 by 0.11, so you will get 0.901. Once you get the 0.901, the second value you can just get using is equal to. So you will get the second value with the press of is equal to is equal button, equal button. Then second time you press equal button, you get 0.731. Then the third time you press, you get 0.659, and the fourth time you press, you get 0.593. So that means the $1 in year 1, at the end of year 1, the value of $1 is 0.901. Then in year 2 the value gets further reduced. Then year 3 the $1 value becomes 0.731. Similarly 0.659 in year 4 and 0.593 in year 5. So to get the present value of the bond, simply multiply the cash flows which are emanating from the bond with the present value factors which we arrived at using the simple calculator. So multiply 100 times 0.901, you get 90.1. Similarly 100 times 0.812, you will get 81.2, and so on. So if you add this total, you will get $963.04, which is similar to what we got using the formula method and the calculator method. So that's it. So you can use any of the three methods to do the calculations. Now let's talk about how to value a premium bond with annual coupons. So if you have the same thing, you will get something like this. You have, why it is a premium bond? Because the coupon rate is 10% and the yield to maturity is 8%. So in the market, interest rate is lower than the stated interest rate at the time of issuance. So therefore the bondholder gets the cash flows at the stated price, not at the yield to maturity, that is the market rate of 8%. So therefore the bond is offered at a premium. So if you use the formula, you will get answer as 1196.36, and similarly with the calculator, n is equal to 20, I by y is equal to 8, PMT is equal to 100, the face value is 1000. So you just compute present value to get 1196.36. Similarly you can get with the table method. So what do you observe? You observe that the par value and the value at the end of the maturity will be the same. That means if you hold the bond is issued in the 0 year, and at the time of issuance the par value and the face value are the same. But if you are not buying the bond from the primary market, and that means the bond has been issued in 0 year, but you are purchasing in say year 1 or say year 3, so that means the life of the bond is now not 5 years but just 4 years from the time or the point where you buy the bond. So when you buy the bond at this point of time, you observe that the PN, that is the par value PN, is lower for a premium bond, and the PO is greater. Similarly for a discount bond, PN is greater than the PO. So what we say is the par value will not change during the bond life cycle, but the bond price should equal to par value at issuance and at maturity. But the bond price may fluctuate during in between the issuance date and the maturity date, before the maturity date. The reason being the bond price may fluctuate is because of inflation or the market yield or sector fundamentals or issuer fundamentals. I think you understood now. So if you see this relationship in a graphical way, we say that the bond price decreases as the yield to maturity increases. So finally, the relationship between coupon and yield we can summarize as, if YTM is equal to coupon rate, then the par value is equal to the bond price, and the bond is called as the par value bond. If YTM is greater than coupon rate, then par value is greater than bond price. So we say this as a discount bond. If YTM is less than coupon rate, then par value is less than bond price. We say it a premium bond. Why? Because the price is above the par value. Okay. So the bond pricing equation can be summarized as C is 1 minus 1 plus R to the power of T by R. This is the textbook definition, but since we are using something like this, let me give you here. P0 is equal to C times present value interest factor annuity plus Pn times present value interest factor. Okay, so this translates to C 1 by R minus 1 by R times 1 plus R to the power of N plus Pn times 1 by 1 plus r to the power of n. Okay, so that will be your value of the bond, or we call it as price of the bond. So in the earlier equation formulation we talked about annual coupon, but as we said in the beginning that bond issuers, they pay interest on a semi-annual basis. So if you have semi-annual interest rates, then how you are going to compute the bond values? In order to do this, what we need to do is convert the annual coupon payments by dividing by 2, so that it becomes semi-annual payments. So once you are receiving every 6 months the coupon, so the years to maturity will naturally increase. So therefore you need to multiply n years with 2. So that means you will have 2 times n years as your maturity periods. The number of periods increases because in an year you are making 2 payments instead of 1 payment. So naturally it will become twice. Then since we are using a semi-annual rate, so we need to divide the annual required rate by 2. After you divide, when you get the solution for the bond, it will be understood using an example. Suppose if we have an ordinary bond which has a coupon rate of 14%, then the owner will get a total of $140 per year, taking into consideration the par value or the maturity value as $1,000. But this $140 will come in 2 payments of $70 each. The yield to maturity is quoted at 16%. The bond matures in 7 years. So if you have this, how many coupon payments are there? So naturally the coupon payments will be based on how many coupon payments are there in the entire period. So you have 70 times instead of what is the maturity? Seven years. 7 into 70 into 70 into 14, so 7 times 2. Okay, so your coupon payments are 7 times 2, that is 14. Semi-annual coupon payment, so instead of $140 you will be receiving $70. So what is the semi-annual yield and what is the bond price? So the semi-annual yield will be 16% divided by 2, that means 8%. Okay, so the bond price will be something like P0 is equal to 70 times present value interest factor annuity 8% comma 14 years plus 14 years means I am saying 14 periods plus 1000, because this is not mentioned, we assume that always you need to assume that the PN is 1000 if it is not given in the problem. So since it is not given, we assume it as the standard one. Present value interest factor 8% comma 14 years or 14 periods. So this translates to 917.56. okay, so this is what is the bond price based on semi-annual coupon rate. So the coupon rate is 14%, the semi-annual coupon payments of $70 each. So that becomes 14 divided by 2. That means the coupons are 70 times 14 years. And since we are having the yield to maturity 16 by 2, so you have this. Now let's talk about computing yield to maturity. Yield to maturity is the equalizing rate between the present value of the bond and the cash flows of the bond. So we can say that it's the rate implied by the current bond price. In order to find the YTM, you need to use trial and error method, or you need to use a financial calculator. But I will show you a shortcut method. We call it as approximate YTM. So let's talk about calculating using the financial calculator. So consider a bond with a 10% annual coupon rate, 15 years to maturity, and a par value of $1,000. The current price is 9280. So that means out of the 5 buttons in that, you have N is given as 15, PV is this. Note that we are writing present value as negative. This is a very important convention. The present value has to be minus, future value has to be plus, and PMT has to be plus. So these two values has to be plus and this has to be minus always, right? So if you are computing present value, you will get a minus sign, because that's how the financial calculator convention works. Okay, so compute I by Y will give me the YTM. Okay, so this is so simple. Suppose you want to calculate the same thing if we have a semi-annual coupon. So what we are going to do is, suppose a bond with a 10% coupon rate and a semi-annual coupons has a face value of $1,000, 20 years to maturity and is selling for this. So we are given P0, right? We are given PN, we are given N, right? And we are given the interest rate, that is I by Y. So I by Y we are going to find out using these how many periods are there. Is the YTM more or less than 10%? What is the semi-annual coupon payment? How many periods are there? So if we put this in the calculator, you have 40 as N, PV as with a minus sign you have to put. In order to put minus sign, you have to use the button plus minus. Okay, so you have to use plus minus button to change the sign as minus. Then PMT is 50, future value is 1000. So you compute I by Y. The I by Y which you get 4% needs to be multiplied by 2, because we have divided this by 2, so it becomes 8%. Okay, so remember that YTM is always given in terms of annual percentage rate. So whatever answer you get for a semi-annual coupon bonds, you are going to multiply this by 2 to choose your answer as 4 times 2, that becomes 8%. So please practice using your financial calculator. So to summarize, finding the value of the bond and finding the yield on a bond is what we have. Now let's talk about current yield versus yield to maturity. What is current yield? Current yield is given by the formula annual coupon over price of the bond. Whereas yield to maturity is similar to your current yield plus capital gains yield. We will discuss this when we take up valuation of stocks. So if we take this into consideration, the capital gains yield and the YTM is computed. Okay, so you just talk about remembering the formula of current yield. The bond indenture. What is bond indenture? It's a contract between the company and the bondholders that includes the basic terms of the bonds, the total amounts of bonds issued, a description of property used as security, if applicable. We call it as collateral, sinking fund provisions, call provisions, details of protective covenants. Okay, so this is what we have as a legal binding on the issuer towards the issuance. The person who makes sure that the bond indenture is followed is what we call him as the trustee. Then another important aspect which we need to discuss on bond valuation is the ratings of the bond. The bond ratings are given by two prominent rating agencies. So we have Moody's here. It talks about high grade, right? And then you have Standard and Poor. So the difference is A small capital caps A small a small a. So triple A rating and S&P writes all in caps. So this means the issuer of the bond has the capacity to pay. It's very extremely strong, right? The medium grade is A, right? And the acceptable grade is B, triple B. Then you have low grade and very low grade. Okay, so income bonds with no interest being paid, we have this something like this. Okay, so these are called as speculative grade bonds, or sometimes called as junk bonds. Then let's talk about different types of bonds. For example, the government bonds, we have treasury securities. In treasury securities we have T-bills, we have T-notes and T-bonds. The difference between all this is T-bills are pure discount bonds with original maturity of 1 year or less. So these are what we call it as the government debt. Okay, so treasury notes, coupon debt with original maturity between 1 and 10 years. So for our purpose, since we defined a bond as a long-term instrument of finance, so we usually take treasury notes and T-bonds, and T-bills are short-term securities because their maturity is 1 year or less. Another important aspect of government bond is the municipal corporations issuance of bonds, that is Baldia bonds. We call it as debt of state or local governments. So they have varying degrees of default risk and rated similar to corporate debt by the rating agencies which we mentioned. Interest received, another important feature of a municipal bonds are their interest received is tax exempted. Then we have zero coupon bonds. What is a zero coupon bonds? A bond which is issued with zero interest, okay, or we call it as zero coupon rate. And these bonds are sometimes called deep discount bonds because they are usually issued by treasury bills, or treasury bills is an excellent example of a zero coupon bond because they are what we call it as the discount bills or deep discount bills. Then another important category of bond is what we call it as the floating rate bonds. All bonds, we said the coupon rate is fixed, except in the floating rate bonds the coupon rate is floats, and it depends on some index value. The examples could be adjustable rate mortgages or inflation linked treasuries. There is less price risk with floating rate bonds, and the coupons may have a collar, that is the rate cannot go above a specified ceiling or below a specified floor. So these are floating rate bonds. They trail between floor and a ceiling. So this is the ceiling and this is the floor. The floating rate goes between this. Okay, so the coupon rate floats depending on some index value. The other important bond types are disaster bonds, income bonds, convertible bonds, put bonds. I think you can discuss this when we take up some advanced courses in investments. Okay, so another important aspect in the Middle East is, in fact, not just Middle East, globally, Sukuk has become a very popular instrument because of its having no interest. Sukuk are bonds which have been created to meet the Islamic law or the Sharia, and as you know, Sharia does not permit the charging or paying of interest. So typically Sukuks are held to maturity and are extremely illiquid, and they are based on PLS, profit loss sharing basis. Then talking about bond markets, we have primarily over-the-counter transactions with dealers connected electronically, extremely large number of bond issues. Okay, and the treasury securities are an exception. So inflation and interest rates, real rate of interest, nominal rate of interest. Real rate of interest is change in purchasing power. Nominal rate of interest is quoted rate of interest. We say that if we take the Fisher effect, we have something like this. In fact, these things we will be discussing in international finance or other courses, so we will skip for our purpose. Okay, so that's it about, even this will skip term structure of interest rates and all this. So you just remember that there is an upward sloping term structure and a downward sloping term structure. So the real rate and the nominal rate, you have here the nominal rate, and this is the real rate, which is minus the interest rate risk premium and the inflation premium. So yield curve is the graphical representation of the term structure, and when we take the yield curve, we are putting putting it in the graph based on their different maturities time for that particular time period. Like say, if I am going for a maturity of varying timelines like 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 25 years, 30 years, but I am drawing this on some point of time, say 31st December. So therefore, either you have normal upward sloping curve or inverted, we call it as the downward sloping curve. So if we have this, we say so see this here, the treasury yield curve. So you have different variations of the curves based on the maturity, and if you see the trend on this Friday and 1 year ago on the same Friday, you find then treasury yield curve is bottoming or downward. Now finally, the factors affecting bond yields: real rate of interest, expected future inflation premium, interest rate risk premium. So just remember this as part of theory, and these are some of the questions which will help you recollect what we discussed. So you can expect these questions as part of your understanding of the learning outcomes of this course. So thank you for listening patiently for this lecture. So with this we have finished 2 lectures. In fact, you can say 3 lectures to complete this chapter on valuation of bonds. The next chapter, chapter 8, will be discussing on valuation of stocks.